Welcome back for our second video lecture in which we'll be talking about the structure of formal documents. First of all, let's define what a formal document is. Essentially, anything you write to a professor, in your jobs, to your boss, anything other than a text or an email to a friend or a family member is a formal document. Now, why is it important to structure those documents? When we write, what we want to say is really always clear to us. It's all in our head, and it all makes sense to us. But for someone reading it for the first time, that's a little bit more of a challenge. So the more clearly structured, and by structured I mean organized, the document, whether it's informative or persuasive, is, the easier it will be for the reader to understand it on a first reading. And hopefully, since we're all very busy at school and our jobs, we shouldn't have to read anything a second or third time. We should be able to read it one time and understand it. So today I want to talk about the structure of direct writing. In a later assignment in this course, we're going to talk about indirect approach. In Western culture, we tend to prefer communicating in a direct way. We state early on what we want or why we're talking or writing to someone, and then back up that argument or that purpose with specific data. Not every culture functions that way. There are also situations in which indirect approach might be more effective than direct. So that's why I'm making that distinction right now, because you will learn how to also construct an indirect argument. So the first question I usually ask my students in the English 102, the Writing for Literate Education, who are freshmen, is how many parts do we divide a formal document into? Frequently, the answer I get is 5, because at some point in high school, our 9th grade English teacher said that every essay has 5 paragraphs. So please understand that that's a myth. The number of paragraphs obviously is driven by how long the document is and how many different ideas we're going to discuss. Also, paragraphs should be unified, which means we're only discussing one major idea per paragraph. But the correct answer I'm looking for is 3. So the 3 parts in any formal document are the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. And that's true for any formal document. So whether we're writing an essay or a research paper for school, whether we're writing a business letter, even in my screenwriting classes, when I teach writing for film or for television to my students, they have to understand that every screenplay is divided into Act 1, 2, and 3. It's simply how we as human beings process information. It's logical, it's structured, it makes sense. So let's look at the introductory section or introductory paragraph first. What we always need in direct approach at the end of the introductory section or paragraph is a clear purpose statement. Frequently, when I ask my students what we find in the introductory paragraph, they say a thesis statement, which is, for all practical purposes, the purpose statement in a research paper, the purpose of writing this paper and the purpose of making an argument, which will then be supported by data in the body of that paper. But in a more general sense, in writing for a business or general purpose, rather than saying or calling it a thesis statement, we're going to call it a purpose statement. And in that purpose statement, you have to let your reader know why you're writing to him or her. Do you simply want to inform that person? Do you want to persuade that person to take a specific action based on this information? Make it clear what you want. Put yourself in the shoes of the reader. If you get a document, whether it's a letter or an email, and by the end of the introductory section, you have no idea why you're reading it or what purpose it serves, you'll probably stop reading. So make it clear what your purpose is and state it. Also, frequently we may begin this paragraph with background information. Sometimes just bluntly stating the purpose will not be clear, so we have to make sure the reader gets enough background information to understand why we are stating this purpose. So the background information really has to fulfill two purposes here. It has to create context, the situation in which we're communicating, our rhetorical situation, and it has to create exigency, or sometimes we also call it exigence. Exigency is the so what? Why is this important? Why should I read this? That's why it's really critical to have the background information be hard, relevant facts. Frequently, writers decide to create sort of this meandering, highly general, somehow related to the topic introductory paragraph that really has very little to do with the context or the exigency of the writing purpose. So make sure that you provide your reader with hard facts that are relevant to your purpose, that create that context and make it clear why it is important. Again, if we don't see the importance of what we're reading, chances are we're going to stop reading. In the body, we will then support that purpose, just as we support the thesis statement in a college essay, by providing relevant details. That could be text, it could be graphs, graphics, whatever graphic choices we need to make to communicate the information as easy to understand as possible for our reader. And again, that body section should be clearly divided into unified paragraphs that will flow from paragraph to paragraph. So again, starting each paragraph with a topic sentence that introduces what specifically this paragraph will be about, and then having a transition sentence at the end of the paragraph to make it clear how and why we're moving from this idea in the current paragraph to the information in the following paragraph. The conclusion or concluding section or conclusion paragraph sort of depends on what it is. In a short memo or letter, it should just briefly wrap up what we're saying. It might include information on how to contact us by phone. It might reiterate a due date. If you're telling your employee that you need this information by close of business tomorrow. What I would avoid as a general rule is to summarize all the information you have just stated in the body of your document. Now, it depends on how long the document is. If you are writing a report that's 60, 100 pages long, then that's something a reader will probably not read from cover to cover. It will most definitely make sense to have a brief summary of the highlight of your body in your concluding section. However, if you're writing a 2, 3, even a 10-page document and you have just stated in great detail all the information in the body, to summarize it again is probably going to be kind of a waste of the reader's time. So just beware of that. Okay? And once we get to specific documents, I will talk in more detail about what your conclusion section should entail. The other thing I wanted to briefly talk about is to talk about the three concepts of rhetoric, which are ethos, pathos, and logos. In creating persuasive arguments, whether we're writing or speaking to an audience, these are the three parts of rhetoric that let us create effectively an argument. Ethos essentially refers to your credibility as a writer or as a speaker. How do we achieve credibility? Once you've become an expert in your field and people come to you to ask you for your expert opinion, you will have ethos because you have earned a degree, you have work experience, you may have published a couple of books on the issue, so therefore you have ethos. As an undergraduate writer, you achieve ethos by doing research, by finding credible sources, and by documenting those sources in your writing or when you speak. The other aspect of ethos is also, and we see this by looking at the root word that shares the same stem with the word ethics, that our message has to be ethical. So we can't pick and choose facts that suit our purpose. So again, and I always tell my freshman students is don't go into a research situation already having made up your mind about what you believe and then picking and choosing data to suit that purpose. Always present information honestly, directly, openly, so that it is clear to your reader that you do not have an agenda, that you don't intend to manipulate your reader or listener with the information. This also includes using appropriate language. Don't use language that your audience will not understand, that will make them feel stupid because they have to look it up in a dictionary. Always make sure you use language that's appropriate to your audience. And again, openness and honesty is very critical here. Pathos, as I said, is the appeal to emotion. We find that quite frequently, especially in advertising. If in reaching an audience in a 30-second commercial spot, we don't really have a whole lot of time to thoroughly explain things. So dramatizing a situation and reaching the viewer through comedy more often than not is a more effective way. It's very powerful to connect with other human beings on an emotional level, so that's probably the most effective way to do it. However, in school, in our professions, we have to rely on logos, which is the appeal to logic. Our information has to be fact-based, and facts are verifiably true. There's no such thing as alternative facts. A fact is a fact. And that's how we present information. That's how we construct arguments. Now, if you can combine logos, the facts, with pathos, if you're communicating in a way that presents verifiable truths along with reaching your reader or your listener on an emotional level as well, then that makes for a very powerful argument. As always, if you have any questions, contact me.